So we finally arrived at the Batman. The newest installment in, well, the newest DC movie. It's not a new installment in the DC universe because it's not a DCEU film. Thank God. Now, DC has been pretty bad as of late. Like, they've made one legitimately great film in the past 5 or 6 years, and that was Shazam. And pretty much everything else they've tried was a disaster, and last year was particularly bad. Justice League was a complete disaster, Suicide Squad wasn't good, and Injustice was terrible as well. And I was looking forward to this movie, because one, it's not DCEU, so it already has a 30% chance of being better. And two, it's not a Zack Snyder movie, which means it has a 100% chance of being better. And this is definitely better than most of the DCEU. That's not a high bar to clear, but it's true. But honestly, because I'm not one of those people who tries to overhype movies. Like, everybody was calling this was going to be a huge masterpiece. I knew it wasn't going to be that. And honestly, it's not bad, but it was a bit of a letdown. Now, like I said, this isn't a bad movie by any stretch, but there are some glaring issues with this movie. And I'll start off with the ones I knew were going to be a problem before I started. The runtime. This movie is too goddamn long. 3 hours is no. For the fourth Avengers movie, which is the 22nd film in a long-running, in this big franchise like the MCU was, yeah, 3 hours to wrap up a huge-ass story like that? Sure, 3 hours, yeah. Your first story, and it's just a gritty noir thriller. There was no excuse for this to be 3 hours. There's a complete storyline you could cut and not really miss much. This movie needed to be shorter. And that leads into another problem, is the pacing. The pacing is god-awful. It is too goddamn slow. I remember I went into the theater, and the movie was... I went to a screening that was supposed to start at 4:15, but as you know, it goes to the previews and everything. The movie started 20 minutes later. It started at like 4:35, which is bullshit in my opinion, because it only had like 3 previews. So, what the fuck? Why was this running so late? But, even still, I checked my phone to see what time it was so I could kind of track where I was at in the film. I remember looking at my phone the first time, and I saw it was like 5:35. I'm like, you serious? I'm only an hour into this movie? This movie had a huge tendency to drag 10 loads of ass. And that was especially apparent in the second half. The entire second half of this movie there was a scene that happened in the middle of the movie that single-handedly almost killed my enjoyment of the film. And the rest of the movie just kind of dragged on as well. I'll get to that scene in a bit when I get to a spoiler corner, I guess. But let's talk about the acting. Okay, first, I already knew there were some casting issues because people... When you cast a white actor in a role that usually goes to any other race, people throw a fucking tantrum. But if you do it in reverse and cast a minority in a white role, nobody cares. Why is there such a double standard with this? And movie studios are doing it constantly. DC alone has been doing it, the past decade has been doing it constantly. Did it with Iris and Wally and Joe West in the awful Flash show. Did it with Iris again in the Flash movie. Did it with Batgirl in the upcoming Batgirl movie, which is going to be ass. And did it twice in this movie with Catwoman and Jim Gordon. Now, to be fair, Jeffrey Wright was pretty good as Jim Gordon. But again, you didn't need to race swap the character. What's the point? And then there's Kravitz as Catwoman. Wasn't a great Catwoman. Not just because she was miscast as the race, but just... The character was just wrong. Her motivations were off, and her certain connections to other characters she has are mind-bogglingly stupid, but I'll get to that later. The costume, I'll get into the costume design in a bit. But Catwoman was a complete miss. Pattinson was a pretty badass Batman. The problem is his Bruce Wayne. Now, it's not really his fault. I blame this on the writers. That instead of the billionaire playboy philanthropist that he is in every incarnation, even the shitty DCEU had him as the billionaire philanthropist, at least to some extent. This one, he's an emo, antisocial jackass, kind of. He's not really, but he's some antisocial emo dude. And that's such a stupid idea. Like, the entire point of Bruce Wayne being, he's like out, like, as his philanthropist, it's the polar opposite of Batman. But now Bruce Wayne and Batman are one and the same, and that's very disingenuous to the character. And when he is Bruce Wayne, because of the way they wrote him, Pattinson is extremely one note when he's out of the suit. Now, he's in the suit the majority of the film. But when he's not, he's incredibly one note, but I can't blame Pattinson. I blame the writers. And I'd say the writers and Matt Reeves, but Matt Reeves was one of the writers as well, so I blame Matt Reeves in particular for that. But he was a pretty badass Batman. Farrell was pretty good as the Penguin, didn't have much screen time, but he was pretty badass as Penguin. And the chase scene was pretty cool, but I'll get to the action in a bit. Paul Dano, I think that's how you say Dano or Dano, it's probably Dano. He was pretty decent as the Riddler. Like, but one thing I will note is that there was a scene where he's, like, talking to Batman, like, on literally a FaceTime. It's pretty stupid. But he's doing his overacting thing, and he's supposed to be intimidating here. There were people in my theater laughing at him. I'm dead serious. He was supposed to be intimidating during that scene, and when he's overacting, and people in my theater started laughing. That's not a good sign. And then there's the one that I thought was going to be one of the worst casting decisions in the film, Andy Serkis as Alfred. He was damn perfect. I mean, he was perfect as Alfred. Holy crap. I thought he was going to be a terrible casting choice for Alfred. Like, I knew he was going to put in a good performance because it's Andy Serkis. He can't put in a bad performance if he tried. But damn, he was good in this role. For a whole 5 minutes. 3 hours. 3 hours. And Alfred gets 5 minutes. Are you kidding me? And then there's John Turturro as Carmine Falcone. Falcone. They pronounce it Falcone in the movie, and it's wrong. Is it that hard to look up how you say it? Or to play one of the video games or something? Like, play the Telltale. It seems like this movie took a lot of inspiration from the Telltale series. And I'll get to that in a second. But they can't get the character's name pronunciation correctly? Are you serious? Then again, he has a connection to multiple characters. One of them, it kind of works, because again, it's like adapted from the Telltale series. Another one is stupid as hell, but I'll get to that later. The action sequences are kind of hit and miss. The hand-to-hand fights are generally pretty good. Except for the one scene where he's like walking down a hallway, it's just people like shooting at him, and the lights from the guns are the only thing that the lights whenever the gunfire is the only thing illuminating it. What's the point? That felt like a waste of time. Because you can't see shit. And I'm pretty sure it was intentional. So what was the point? But the hand-to-hand fights were pretty good. The music never matches correctly, though. Especially the first two hand-to-hand fight scenes. The music is laughably off. Off. It doesn't match the fight. It doesn't match a fight scene whatsoever. And then there's the chase scene. While it's pretty fun to watch, and Farrell's pretty fun as the Penguin in the scene, it's edited like crap. So many quick cuts. It's jumping from cut to cut to cut to cut so quickly. And yeah, it's trying to get these weird camera angles. Like there'll be ones from like the tire of Penguin's car pointing at the Batmobile. But it's cutting every 2 seconds at most. I swear there isn't a single cut in that entire scene that went long until it's like the long take of Penguin driving and then Batman like ramps off the explosion of the trucks. Until that, I don't think there's a shot that went longer than 3 seconds. If even, probably more longer than 2 seconds. because there's so many cuts through it. It should never be a good sign when it reminds me of Getaway. It was definitely shot better than Getaway, but even still. See, it fights kind of hit or miss. The characters are relatively well developed. Like, I like the Riddler's pretty cool. He's a decent villain. Catwoman, like I said, is a complete miss, but I need to get into spoilers for that. Penguin, if he had more screen time, it would have been pretty cool. Again, he was cool in the scenes he was in. Carmine Falcone, Totoro did a damn good job, and his character was pretty good. Again, Batman, cool Batman. Wrong Bruce Wayne. Jim Gordon, pretty cool. I like Gordon in this. And Alfred, probably best part of the movie. Just like that crappy Justice League movie from last year. Alfred was the only good thing in that movie, but Alfred, best part of the movie. So, the score is pretty forgettable. Danny Elfman and Hans Zimmer are the same. I don't know who did the music for this. I honestly don't care enough to look it up. But the score was pretty forgettable overall. Like I said, the music didn't really match the hand-to-hand combat scenes, especially early on. And the rest of the music was just kind of there. Nothing really noteworthy about it. Cinematography looks pretty cool, except when the editing is atrocious, like especially during that one, during the car chase scene. That was pretty bad. The costume design is laughably bad. Oh my god, like the Batsuit isn't terrible. It needed to be better though, like especially that stupid logo on his chest, it looks terrible. Like, why doesn't it have the bat ears? And there's a thing in this movie where he can like detach it and basically use it. And I'm like, okay, not a terrible idea, but really we're ripping off Superman 2? And then Catwoman's costume is awful. I can't even call it a costume, it's just some kind of leather outfit with a really bad, like, ski mask that's just cut over the eyes, and over the, just, like, cut here, and it kind of has things that kind of look like little cat ears, but it doesn't really work. It's a shit costume. Riddler's is one of the worst superhero villain costumes I've ever seen in my life. It is horribly bad, like, it is Teen Wolf level bad. I'm pretty sure there were villains in one of the seasons of Teen Wolf that had that exact same costume design. That's pretty bad. The Batmobile, I get what they were going for. Like, it kind of grew on me as the chase scene was going on, but at first it's just kind of a lame design, but it grew on me as the chase was going on, so that looked fine. Is that it to talk about before spoilers? Yeah, time to go into spoilers. The thing that really pissed me off was a scene directly in the middle of the movie between Batman and Catwoman on a rooftop. Now, before you jump at me, and if you haven't seen the movie, this isn't like from Batman the Killing Joke, that piece of crap movie. It's not like that. Instead, it's revealed that Carmine Falcone is Catwoman's father. I almost verbally shouted, "What the fuck is wrong with you?" in the middle of the theater. I didn't, but I wanted to. Who thought this was a good decision? Are you fucking kidding me? Just, ever since 1980, everybody's been trying to do the family connection trope as some big twist. Doesn't work. Not anymore. Now it just comes off as contrived. It was cool back in Empire Strikes Back, because you didn't see it coming, and just because you don't see it coming doesn't mean it's a good twist. Roberto Orgara Acosta needs to take note. So just because you make a twist that comes out of that you don't expect, doesn't make it a good twist. It still has to make sense. This twist comes out of nowhere, doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and is kind of pointless. Like, you could have made one altercation where maybe Carmine kills Catwoman's mother, and that's why she's going out for revenge. Could have made it something as simple as that, but no, we had to throw in this shitty family dynamic, which barely plays a part in this at all. And the second she said the words "white privileged," I almost got up and walked out. Because there's some bullshit commentary in this movie that I knew was happening right off the bat. The very first scene in this movie is a debate between two people who are being elected for mayor. One of them is a white dude, the other one's a black woman. You can guess where this is going. Because of course the white guy he's dirty. He's been doing all this undercover bullshit. So have a bunch of other white guys, and so this doesn't work. Especially when your writer and director is a white dude. Making commentary like this, one, is already stupid enough when a minority does it themselves, because it just comes off as pandering. And two, doesn't work when you have no idea what you're even talking about. And three, what you're talking about is stupid as fuck. This is some of the worst commentary I've ever seen in a major motion picture. This is horrible. It's not subtle in the slightest, and I wanted that other candidate to die in this movie as well. She got on my nerves. And I remember the Riddler's good. They shot her. I was like, yay! But nope, she survived. Because of fucking course she did. Ugh. And then there's too many fucking, like, Batman has to go. Oh my god, I'm trying to figure out how to sort this out. He's constantly going from place to place to place. Like, this story, it somehow moves too slowly, but it also doesn't have any fucking breaks to it. He's constantly going from place to place to place to place. And just because he goes somewhere, gets the tiniest bit, like, he goes, finds a riddle, goes somewhere else, gets a riddle, goes somewhere else. It's like, can we stop for 5 seconds? And even though the movie still goes at a snail's pace. There was something else I wanted to talk about with the... Oh, yeah. The end of the movie has a reveal of the Joker, played by Barry Keoghan from Eternals. I'm actually very much looking forward to this. And something else that was weird, speaking of villains, the Penguin wasn't that much of a villain in this movie. He had no answers. The car chase, the only scene where he acted like a villain was when he was being chased by Batman. I guess they're setting him up for the next one, but are they setting up Penguin or Joker for the sequel? Make up your mind. They're setting up both of them for the same movie, aren't they? Great. So, I thought this movie was going to kind of flip the trope on its head of Carmine Falcone isn't one of the villains of the movie. I thought that's where they were going with it. That's where they seemed like they were going with it. And I just remembered what the other thing I wanted to talk about was, well, I'll get to it in a second. Hopefully I don't forget again. But then they just ditched that and make him pretty much the main villain. Because Penguin disappears for the majority of the second half of the movie. He shows up for another 8 seconds, but that's about it. And then shows up for one shot at the end of the movie, kind of setting him up for a sequel. And then Falcone, I guess, becomes kind of the main villain. And honestly, after they caught Riddler, that should have been the end of the movie. But the movie dragged another 30 minutes until we finally got to the end credits. Speaking of, so there's no end credit scene? Really, Reeves? Come on, get with it. Every comic book film now, almost every comic book film nowadays has an end credit scene. Get the memo. So anyway, now I remember what I wanted to talk about. I said it takes aspects from the Telltale series, and what I mean is that Thomas Wayne had some connection to Carmine Falcone. It's a bit different here, but kind of in the same vein. Now, it's revealed that Thomas Wayne ended up going to Falcone for help because there was some reporter, I guess, who was tracking, or I guess wasn't tracking, was digging up dirt on him when he was running for mayor, and kind of brought up dirt on his wife, Martha, had been in and out of a mental institute, or was it a mental institution or was it rehab? I don't remember. It was one or the other. Maybe it was a mental institution, because if I remember, there's an alternate timeline where Martha becomes the Joker. Clever reference, but I digress. I guess he went to Falcone to kind of shut him down, I guess, to kind of keep him out of it, to kind of keep all this buried, and I guess Falcone led to that guy being murdered. And and it's revealed later on that Thomas did it just to protect Martha, and I guess in so protecting Bruce as well. He didn't care about his political, how he looked on the news. He didn't care about his political stuff anymore. He was just protecting his family. I'm like, okay, that's decent. It's like the only purpose Alfred has in this entire movie is to tell that to Bruce. But it's weird because Falcone also ended up hiring some guy to somebody else to kind of get rid of this guy, and that guy also led to Thomas and Martha being murdered. It's not very clear. It's kind of convoluted. And it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It kind of jumps back and forth because I guess it's trying to be subversive, but it doesn't work. It just doesn't make sense. That's a good way to describe the good portion of this movie. It doesn't make a lot of sense. So that's the Batman. Yeah. Some good ideas in here, some good performances, but there are also some bad casting decisions, poor costume design, a plot that's relatively incoherent. I'd say it's a coherent plot, but there are elements of the plot that just don't make sense. Characters and character relationships that are completely superfluous, bullshit commentary, and some choppy editing keep this from being great. That's all I got for the Batman. I'm giving this a C. Again, this wasn't terrible, but this is again purely due to the 3-hour runtime. I probably won't watch this again. Maybe I'll watch it once, but honestly, I don't. This movie's gonna make bank regardless of what I say. But I would recommend, if you're gonna see it in theaters, which you probably will, matinee at most. Don't bother with it. I didn't see it in 3D. I don't even know if this movie came out in 3D, but I always go for a matinee. I never watch 3D. I never do it in 3D because last time I went to a 3D movie, the 3D wasn't very good, so I just avoid that altogether. So I usually go to a matinee. So yeah, that's all I got for the Batman, and I'm really worried about the rest of the DC movies coming this year. I have a feeling they're going to be very bad.